So we've also got to take into account, the more abstract aspects of the process, because as you move through this, it will bring up a lot of emotional stuff. These are sort of hidden aspects, what might be called the intangibles. They're really the bits in between the steps. So if you imagine the steps, like steps, the bit in between the steps is that you step over. These are where the intangibles lie, and they're invisible, but you have a large impact on ourselves, just like our own emotions do. They're invisible, but they really set the direction for our lives. They have a profound effect. We've got to take them into account. The design process acknowledges this, and interestingly enough, the architecture supports this sort of exploration. This is in part because the architecture itself is very like we are. It's got a physical exterior and it's got an abstract inside, and we're pretty much the same. We have physical bodies, and then we have this emotional inner self that is essentially invisible. And space, interesting enough, is pretty invisible. What we see is, we see the walls, floors, ceilings of the building, but the inside is sort of empty, and this is partly why people think of architecture as something you look at from the outside. You look at it from the inside, all you see is space. It's not. It's abstract. It impacts us in terms of our emotional self. So you've got to take this into account as you're moving through the design process. And this is largely a consciousness raising exercise. It increases our awareness, and this is what the true sustainability promotes. It promotes increased awareness, heightened consciousness, and that's why we have to embrace it as being something good. That it's on an evolutionary level. We're having to look more clearly at who we are, and how we're living, and so on. And all of this will influence the direction and the sort of choices that you make. Really, what we're trying to achieve is a balance. Is a balance between what we call the head aspects and the heart aspects. So the head would be representing, logic and reason, the physical world, maleness to a certain extent. The inner aspects would be represented by the heart, which would be, our emotions, our intuition, our feelings, and that would be on the more feminine side of the spectrum. So we're really trying to find this balance. Things have gotten a little out of balance in terms of the last, certainly a couple of 100 years, but possibly even a couple of 1,000 years, where the male principle has dominated. Everything is very logic driven, science and so on, all very logical. And the more abstract aspects of life have just been overshadowed. So sustainability is inviting us to integrate these two things again, and the house process facilitates this. So we could think of the physical aspects of the house like, the male aspects of it, and interesting enough, it's generally men who are, building houses and designing houses. So everything is skewed in favor of this sort of physical stuff. But it's women who sort of occupy the insides of buildings and lend their feeling to it. So, but a lot of times that's not facilitated by the physical building. So we need to bring the emotional stuff in at the design stage and find this balance within ourselves primarily, and then let that out picture in terms of the buildings we create.